To ground us in preparation for our featured presenter, I'm very pleased to have with us Gregory Stevens, who is I want to say the executive director of Interfaith Power and Light. One day.
Northern California director.
Northern California director. And so the floor is yours, my dear friend.
Thank you. I, like you, I'm going to read from my phone. And I'm going to claim it's green, and I just didn't print out my words. So good morning, and thank you for gathering here in San Francisco's Interfaith community. We gather across our traditions and our many ancient stories, and yet we're united and enriched by our diversity. Across cultures and spiritual traditions, this time of year has long been celebrated and honored as sacred. May Day celebrations recognize the fertility of earth, the returning warmth, the fire and energy of life renewing itself. These traditions remind us that human beings were never meant to see ourselves as separate from nature, but as nature reflecting upon itself. And this past weekend, many of us also celebrated Mother's Day. And I've been thinking about what connects these traditions and these celebrations together. And maybe it's this, the sacred act of nurturing life. As a queer kid, I can attest to the fact that mothering is not really just about biology, but it's about tending to what is fragile, protecting what's vulnerable, feeding that which must grow. Mothering is staying present through uncertainty and creating the conditions where life can flourish. And in this moment of climate crisis, perhaps climate justice is one of the deepest forms of mothering we can practice. To advocate for clean air and water, to defend communities from pollution and displacement, to insist that future generations deserve beauty, safety, dignity, and joy. To remember that Earth is not disposable, and neither are people. The climate crisis reveals something many spiritual traditions have taught us for centuries, for millennia, since time immemorial. We belong to one another, and I am my brothers, my sisters, my hero, shiro, theiros, keeper. The smoke from a wildfire does not stop at neighborhood borders. Extreme heat exposes inequalities that have always existed. Drought, flooding, and pollution remind us that our lives are profoundly interconnected. The crisis we face is not only environmental, it's also a crisis of relationship. We live within systems that teach domination instead of reciprocity, extraction instead of care, individualism instead of community. But spring teaches us another story. Nothing blooms alone. Forests survive through interconnected root systems. Pollinators and flowers depend on one another. Compost becomes nourishment for new life. Regeneration happens collectively. And movements for justice must work the same way. Lately, I've been thinking about what it means to mother a movement. Our movements for justice, they need strategy and urgency, but they also need, and this is where we as people of faith really step in, tenderness. They need care. They need spaces where people can grieve, rest, laugh, sing, and remember why we're fighting in the first place. To mother a movement is to keep people human inside the struggle. It's to feed people at our meetings. It's to check in on the exhausted organizer, to make room for sorrow without giving up on hope, to believe that relationships themselves are part of the work of transformation. That's the part of what interfaith community can offer us in this time. Not easy optimism, not denial, but grounded hope. The kind rooted in shared responsibility and shared belonging. So as we gather in this season of renewal, may we remember that we are not separate from one another or from this living earth. May we become good people who nurture courage for the common good. May we mother what is fragile, defend what is sacred, and help grow a world where all of life can flourish. Amen, and blessed be.
Amen. Thank you, Gregory. I just wanted to say, I had occasion several months ago to go to Texas to meet my new granddaughter for the first time. And my son lives in just outside of Dallas. It's very rural out there. And we were driving, and he said, Dad, he goes, they're building these data centers. and they're taking all of our water. And I became very, very sad because it was just sort of a blatant, I mean, the people are feeling it, but it is just a blatant, horrible injustice, both for the environment and for the people that seek to live in harmony with it. You all are good people of faith, and you know the power of silence. There's a lot of noise out there right now, and there's a lot of people trying to change the narrative right now. In silence, we can appreciate the balance of nature and our responsibility as stewards, as people of faith. We are very blessed to have with us today the director of the San Francisco Department of the Environment, someone I consider a friend, Tyrone, and he is somebody who is really interested in working with us. He came out to the Presidio and we had a very good conversation about next steps and plans, but part of the next steps was to come and speak with you today. So Tyrone, we welcome you warmly, and we invite you to offer your presentation. And I think Sharon is going to be working with you on making sure that everything works right.
Does this mic work? Okay. So it's in the slide is in the middle of my presentation, but I've heard that if you start with a famous person in an image, that usually you get everyone's attention. And that's our governor when he was mayor of our city, signing the legislation which made composting mandatory in San Francisco a little over a decade ago. So let me back up.
Can you bring the mic up just a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
First, thank you, Michael, for inviting me. Thank you to the San Francisco Interfaith Council, and thank you to St. Mark's for hosting this morning. I know this morning I'm here on the day after of the passing of your beloved founder of the Interfaith Council, and that I think you heard through Gregory's comments and also through Michael's comments through kind of the noise and the narrative that we see all around us, this ability to come together and this ability of this organization to bring people of different faiths together is probably what we need more than ever right now. And I want to begin by acknowledging this space and this area actually holds a very personal memory to me. So right next to this church, some of you may know is the San Francisco Night Ministry. In the early 2000s, when I was just getting started in my career in city service, I volunteered there late at night as a crisis phone counselor under Reverend Don Fox, who was the third, I think, night minister of the program. I was definitely much younger. My hair was not purple, but I still remember those very quiet hours, because those are late night into the early mornings, and I just answered the phone, and I listened to people in their moments of fear, anxiety, loneliness, grief, or just uncertainty about what's happening. That work continued kind of what I learned throughout life, that service is sometimes just the simple act of listening and staying present when someone needs to be heard. And Reverend Fox connects that work and this place to my own story. He was the pastor of the True Sunshine Episcopal Church in San Francisco's Chinatown, where my grandparents took me to service when I was growing up. So being here this morning actually feels like an even kind of bigger circle moment for myself. It brings me back to the place and the people who taught me that care is not something that's abstract. Care is simply something that we practice. You kind of figured I grew up in Chinatown as a small walk-up apartment with my grandmother. She was an immigrant from China who came to this country with very little in her pockets, but with a great deal of tradition, discipline, and hope for the future. Every night, she would boil a very large pot of tap water for our family. And that was the pot of water we drank from, either in the night or in the ensuing day. As a child, I didn't understand the science behind it. I just knew it was within the rhythm of our daily life, what we did at home. But looking back, I see that act differently now. That pot of water was an act of care, but it was also an act of mistrust. It was doing what the system had not yet earned the right to ask her to trust. And every Sunday, my grandparents would walk me up the hill from where we lived on clay up to True Sunshine, and that's where I learned many of the lessons that guide me today. That faith is not only what we believe, faith is how we serve. Faith is how we carry responsibility when the burden feels very heavy, and most of the time when the outcome feels uncertain. And that is why climate action to me and faith are not separate conversations. They meet in this question of what and who we are trying to protect. And that means so much even now, because we're living in a time where climate change is not some distant data point. It is in the air we are breathing during wildfire smoke. It's in the heat that puts our elders at risk. It's in the storms and the floods and simply the bills that people are paying that they're struggling to meet. And we're also coming at a time when we just heard trust is at an all-time fragile high. People hear promises from institutions, even like mine, that they hear, we got goals, we have targets, we have benchmarks, but the people in your congregations and your communities are asking something much more basic. Will the air be safe enough for my child? Will the elder I just mentioned be protected? Will my neighborhood be seen? Will government show up when it says it will? That is what I think the climate question is now. Not only the scientific part of can we reduce emissions, but can we rebuild trust enough through protection people can actually feel? You here understand this probably more than most being in the faith community, because people don't experience hardships in policy categories. A family in crisis doesn't usually say, today I'm experiencing climate vulnerability and food insecurity. They say, I am tired. I am hungry. I need someone to see me for me. That is where climate action becomes moral, not because the planet, it's about the planet in the abstract, it's because it's about people in the concrete. And that is what my department, the Environment Department, has been charged with helping San Francisco organize for now over 30 years. At the San Francisco Environment Department, we don't think about history and our history as a list of programs and accomplishments. I think about it in terms of how lessons and values became systems. Many of the things that we feel are just normal of what it means to be a San Franciscan today were not inevitable. Composting was not inevitable. Recycling at the scale we do was not inevitable. The clean electricity we have powering our city was not inevitable. Food recovery today at the scale we do was not inevitable. These things happened because people organized. They advocated, they legislated, they implemented, they made adjustments, and they just kept going. And they happened because the values that we had as a city became systems. Because that's what really matters. Because values without systems can definitely inspire us, but values with systems can protect us. That is the role that government has to play, not replacing community care, but helping organize it so that systems can reach more people. And that only works when we do that together. And this slide represents what that means, that together we make sustainability a reality here in San Francisco. I want to emphasize the word together. Together is not decorative. Together is simply the work. Government can pass policies. We do that all the time. We set standards, coordinate departments, we fund programs, but government can never do anything alone. And faith communities in particular reach people, and they reach people in moments where institutions often cannot. You translate these big human problems into human obligations. You remind us that care is not a weakness, and it's actually our greatest strength. Coordination may sound bureaucratic. It sounds like a lot of meetings, spreadsheets, and follow-up. That's a lot of what I have to do. But coordination is actually the plumbing, what Gregory talked about is the plumbing of justice, right? Without that coordination, you do not have justice. And without coordination, good intentions become scattered. Without coordination, the 3-bin system I mentioned that is now part of our daily life would not exist. This is probably one of the most representative things of what system change looks like when it succeeds. It simply becomes normal. Without coordination, clean electricity and 100% all electric buildings remain something of an aspirational goal instead of becoming how the city operates and builds for the future. Without coordination, clean technology and cleaner air vehicles only find the market where it's the easiest, not necessarily where equity demands it the most. And without coordination, good food gets wasted while families go hungry. And I want to spend just a moment on food because I think food, at least for me, is one of the clearest places where climate action and faith meet. Many faith communities already understand food as dignity. You do work all the time in this space, providing dignity, care, and belonging. When good food is wasted while families go hungry, that is a failure of systems and a call to repair. Food recovery reduces waste, prevents pollution, and feeds people. And faith communities in particular know where the need shows up. You know the elders that are isolated. You know the families that are stretching meals day to day. You know the people that are sometimes too proud, too afraid, or too tired to ask for help. That knowledge is not secondary to climate policy or climate work, it's essential to climate policy. And that's actually what the work requires right now. Systems strong enough to protect people and relationships trusted enough to reach them. Because of all of this coordination I just mentioned, all this advocacy, all this implementation, San Francisco has made tremendous progress. Our emissions have almost been cut by half compared to our 1990 levels. That matters. But progress doesn't mean that our work is finished. It doesn't mean that every community in our city has benefited equally. And it doesn't mean that the next phase will be any easier. And in my mind, the next phase is actually harder because it starts to reach deeper into our systems. It reaches deeper into our buildings, our transportation systems, our infrastructure, our food, our financing, behavior, and trust. This slide shows why. Right now, 90% of San Francisco's emissions and the related pollution come from transportation and buildings. That means this is where the biggest opportunities are, and it shows that the opportunities are really close to daily life and these systems I talk about. They're embedded in how people move, how homes are heated, how buildings operate, how families cook, gather, worship, and rest. People don't live in these sectors though. They live in homes, they walk to the bus stop, they cook meals, they gather in your congregations. So our job, and a big part of our job at the Environment Department and with all of you, is to help us translate climate action from this chart here into daily life. And that's what our climate action plan is meant to organize. I am really proud to announce that Mayor Lurie announced our latest update to our climate action plan just a few weeks ago on April 16th. And it set forth a framework for this next phase. There's 30 strategies and over 183 actions across 18 city departments. It's like herding cats. Those numbers tell the truth though. No single department can do this alone. And climate action is not just one program, what I like to say is it's how a city learns how to protect people in a changing world and for the future. But a plan only matters, as I said, if it becomes visible in people's daily life. So our challenge is to move the plan off the page from this climate action plan and into the neighborhood. I'm going to go over some of the priorities from the plan, the kind of city San Francisco is trying to become in the future. We want healthier homes, cleaner transportation, less waste, more access to nature, greater resilience, more equitable protection. These are not just policy boxes that you can hear me rattle these off. These are commitments for what is the city we want to become in the future. The plan spans a number of sectors and categories: energy, transportation, housing, and land use, building operations, healthy ecosystems, water, and the circular economy. It also includes innovation, funding, finance, and governance, because these good intentions also need good structure and resources and accountability. And so the measure of the plan is not how comprehensive this plan looks, it's about whether it protects people. One of our goals is around building electrification. Building electrification can sound technical, but let me just break it down more simply for everyone. When you have an electric building, you are breathing cleaner indoor air, you have less pollution, you have healthier places where people live or worship and gather. And for your faith communities, buildings are not just property, they are also sanctuaries. They are kitchens and classrooms or dining halls and meeting halls like this, and places of refuge. And so this transition has to respect that real capacity, and that transition of how we bring along, whether it's a church or a small congregation or someone that lives in a home in a low-income apartment, how we help them navigate is through partnership. Our next big goal around transportation is more than vehicles. It's not just about electrifying vehicles and everything on the road, it's about access. Can people get to work, school, their medical appointments, and to their families safely and affordably? A zero-emission transportation system, which must include public transit, must include people who may never buy an electric car. Clean mobility has to be a public good, not a luxury product. Waste reduction and circularity. Waste reduction, as we heard from Gregory, is more than what goes in the bin. It's about refusing a throwaway culture. I know that's in some of your traditions, the theology of repair is in there. It's a fundamental belief that nothing and no one is truly disposable. A throwaway culture does not stop with products. It teaches us not to throw away food, neighborhoods, workers, elders, people who are just inconvenient to remember about every day. And climate action and this work asks us to practice a different ethic. Repair instead of discard, repair instead of waste, and recovery instead of abandonment. And access to nature has to be made more abundant in this city. Nature is one of the clearest ways that we connect as people back to the planet. It is public health, it is mental health, it's also shade on a hot day, and it's places for children to play and for elders to breathe. And as I said, access is not equal in San Francisco, and we still have pockets of the city that do not have access to nature. And a city that cares must make nature more accessible to everyone, to connect them to one another, their neighborhoods, and to this planet. And this is the heart of the plan: community, resilience, and equity. You all are demonstrating that here today by coming across all your different faiths with a single purpose: to work together. climate action without equity and working together can reproduce the same harms it is trying to solve. A cleaner city that is unaffordable is not a victory. A greener economy that leaves workers behind is not justice. A resilience plan that protects some neighborhoods while others remain exposed does not work. We are not trying to decarbonize the city or just meet those emissions targets and reduce those emissions. We're trying to deepen dignity at its core. And that's why community engagement is not optional and is laid out throughout this climate action plan and needs all of your help. It's how we make sure the work reaches people that it's meant to reach. And so community engagement is not the final step after the plan is written. It's how climate action becomes real. It's shaped by the people who are most affected. It has to be explained in the language that is used. It has to show up in trusted relationships. It has to create ways for residents to act, not just worry. And all of you understand this deeply. I'll just run through a couple examples of what we've been doing at the department to give you an idea of where you might be interested to target. One is the Climate Equity Hub. This idea didn't come from us in the Environment Department, it came from community. And the purpose was clear that as we transition to these all-electric buildings, we cannot leave low-income residents behind. And so the hub is designed as a one-stop shop led by community partners, labor partners, where we're training up the workforce. We're connecting people to all the incentives as a one-stop shop. And we're building, again, this greener future. And the deeper lesson, just as I've been saying over and over again, is partnership, right? It's not the Environment Department coming in and retrofitting every single home, it's communities going in and retrofitting everyone's home. Another way we partner is through education. We reach over 25,000 youth every year going out to schools. We cover topics like zero waste, toxics reduction, biodiversity, electrification. We are trying to reach as many people as we can, and we want to work with you to reach even more. We also work directly with businesses. Climate action is shaped by the places where people work. And so we work directly with businesses. Again, just like we talked about the Climate Equity Hub, we do that for the businesses as well, helping them become green through our Green Business Program. And that protects workers and lowers the cost for those businesses. And finally, as I wrap up, service. Just like many faith-based organizations, the Environment Department believes in taking action together. We relaunched our Climate Volunteer Program this past year and are working with First Lady Becca Prouda as she launches her citywide initiative, One City Day, in just a few months, which she wants to catalyze and inspire people to take service as an act of being a San Franciscan. We offer monthly volunteer activities. We partner with organizations that are interested in hosting volunteers. And we remind people that you can take one positive action, because we know taking one positive action through service restores agency. And so just to wrap up, the Climate Action Plan is both an insurance policy and an investment plan. And I think it positions San Francisco to lead again. And this at a time, as Michael mentioned, when national climate leadership we know is not there. And in some cases reversing course, San Francisco's leadership matters even more today. And that leadership will only be real if it includes everyone. And so that's why we need your help. And so today I'm joined by Anya over there in the back. She and I are going to be here, and we would welcome a follow-up conversation with anyone in the room who is interested in building upgrades, food recovery, climate education. You're just wondering, what do we do about this rising emissions? Whatever you want to talk about related to climate, we are here. We also don't want to bring you an unfunded to-do list. So we do have programs and grants available and incentives available. We want to connect you and all of your members to those as well. And I just want to thank you for the time and recognize Michael and the leadership present in this room. And I'll close where I began with that pot of water that my grandmother boiled. She was teaching me that care is a daily act. Care is repeated. Care does not wait for perfect conditions. Care does what it can with what it has, and asks the next generation to build something better. And our responsibility now as we leave this room and as we move forward in our days is to build a city and a San Francisco worthy of that care, so that no city has to wonder whether the air is safe or whether the water is safe enough to drink, whether no elder is left alone in the heat, where we don't treat neighborhoods as disposable, and where climate leadership is measured by who and what we protect. Thank you.
Thank you. As many years as I've known you, I didn't know your story, and your story is a good match for what you're doing. So thank you very much. Do we have any questions here? Sir. Father.
The 3 bins.
Yes.
It's too complicated for us old people. The young people you taught, I got something in my hand to throw out. I see 3 bins, 8 signs on each one of them, and I can't figure out what's the thing with this cup and that cup. Is technology getting better, or are you going to do something for us old people? Thank you.
The generational divide.
The generational divide, and as young as I look, I'm not too far away, and so I definitely was here before the 3-bin system existed. Innovation is getting better, so that is the positive news. And innovation is happening in every one of those sectors that I mentioned, right? And we can see it just, think about where we were 15 years ago with electric vehicles, right? There were hardly any out there, and now look at what has happened with market transformation. That's happening with waste too. And so we started with a simple lesson of like, what can we do? I don't think we've reached necessarily the boundaries of where we can reach with just education. That's going to be a consistent process, and there are younger people in the pipeline coming out from school, as you mentioned, that know better and are going to be teaching all of us. So one of the technologies we've been working with is something that is called, I'm just going to call it Oscar, not Oscar the Grouch. I know that's where everyone goes. That's called Oscar, and it's a TV screen that uses kind of talking about AI, there's big AI with data centers, there's also just very simple AI, because AI is just a kind of a software system that runs and can interpret things. So it's a localized AI system where there's a camera, and as you walk up to a bin, and you're about to put that banana peel in the black bin, it does this really nice and friendly cartoon character going, and then it directs you with an arrow over to the green bin. So you have innovative solutions like that. And I think we're also going to need to use more technology on the back end too. Like I think there are certain limits. Some people get confused of where things go. You have tourists and people coming in and out of the city. And so we've been looking at processing on the back end after everything goes into to our ecology facilities. So in our study, we found, like just in our black bin, 40% of what's going in the black bin is organic material. Right? So that's 40% of material that should be in the green bin or even being recovered that we can be like composting. And so we're looking at technologies right now to help address that part. And the last one is I am happy to sit down with you and still work with you on explaining any item you want.
Two disparate questions. First off, I served as chairman of the Air Resources Board in a former life. I appreciate your very thorough
Thank you.
overview. Two questions. The first one is your experience on the Bay Area Air District Board, because I think you'd be a very informed kind of leader there. And the second one is recology. And they had cheated and done some things relative to billing, and that demoralized a lot of people. Have you had the ability to be an influence for good on monitoring your contract and those kinds of things that hold them accountable? Because it's a very rich contract, and make them aware of they need to be a very important partner for you in all of these things, just like you talked about a moment ago. So could you comment on those things?
Absolutely. So I didn't mention one of the other positions I hold. I serve on the Bay Area Air District, which is the regional body that sets all of our air quality rules for the 9-county Bay Area. And just yesterday, we were deliberating a rule that we passed in 2023 It was a rule that would phase out gas water heaters over several years. And we were debating, like, is the market ready? So the way that we designed that rule, for example, is we said, the market's not ready when we pass the rule, and so we need to have a follow-up conversation. And I actually think that's what good policy should do, not like set something in stone and then let's revisit it 50 years. It should be in this constant state of like, okay, where are things? Do they meet our hypothesis or theory? And so from 23 to 26, we've been working with our team on evaluating technologies, working with all the cities and regions, training up contractors to just see how close we could get for this 2027, January 27 implementation date. And the conversation was, actually, it's a rich conversation. Everyone had diverse opinions on this board, as you would expect. And the decision was, the market has moved because we've made that policy decision. Options exist today for low voltage heat pump water heaters, which are a replacement technology for hot water tanks, that didn't exist because of that policy we set in 23. And what we said though is there's still a gap. So when you calculate the cost of having your gas-fired water heater and then needing to upgrade whenever it fails, so it's not telling you gotta rip anything out, just whenever it fails, the cost difference is about $3,500. And the $3,500 is still a burden because we talk about equity and who can afford it. Not everyone has $3,500 to even do those upgrades. And the market is not ready yet, even with the technology, even with the workforce development. And so I think the approach we're doing is we're designing kind of another off-ramp or an exemption pathway for people with financial difficulty or infrastructure challenges, because it may not even be your fault. You may have challenges because PG&E can't upgrade your service, and we don't want that to be a barrier to getting hot water in your home. And so we created an exemption pathway based both on income qualifications, and we're designing one that's also based on kind of housing costs, because it isn't, if we just tie this to a federal poverty standard, like our cost of living is too high in the Bay Area for that to be a meaningful impact, and you'll only reach like the most impoverished and not people who are maybe in the middle or kind of low income category. And so that's how we're designing this, and we're pushing out the implementation until October of next year to give us another year to do even more training and education and set the standards. So that's on the Air District side. On a big level, we actually regulate all of the refineries. We have several, gas refining. We all depend on gas here. We fly a plane, that gas is being produced, and that oil is being refined at a refinery. And so we also have the charge of regulating all those refineries to ensure that that pollution doesn't go into the surrounding communities. And so we're always setting new rules on that. On the recology front, yes, this gets to almost the question about trust, right? We have this long-standing agreement and arrangement with Recology as a city. Cannot use any other partner. It's a non-competitive contract and arrangement we have with Recology that's been here for many, many decades. And that trust was broken, right? Through a lot of things that happened, including kind of like improperly not paying for things that should have been paid for through ratepayer dollars. We have a brand new process that was set up, voted on by the voters here in San Francisco, that established a couple of different ways to create more transparency and accountability. So we now have a refuse rate administrator. Before it was Public Works that was managing the Recology contract. Now we have a separate office within the controller's office whose sole job is to just look at the accounting and look at the numbers. And then we come in as kind of the technical experts on the environmental side and the recycling, composting, to make sure that the system still works. And then we still have Public Works because obviously they have an important role to play. And I think this kind of like triangular kind of transparency has helped a lot, because we've now set service level agreements for Recology, which have never existed before. And so now we can benchmark their progress, like we should for anyone that we do business with, right? Like what targets are you trying to meet? Are you meeting them? Okay, why aren't you meeting them? And is that, or if you're gonna spend money on X, you don't get to make that decision yourself. You have to go now, not only to the refuse rate administrator, but to a new board. So there's another board on top of that that is represented through our Public Utilities Commission, our city administrator, and our controller's office on the board.
I think I can speak for everybody in this room.
I think you should be on that oversight committee too.
We do have a role. I'm not on that oversight committee, but I would definitely play a role.
You should.
We have time for one more question, and then if I heard you right, you said you're going to stick around
Yeah,
afterwards to talk to
Anya and I will be around.
My question is short. Do you know about scrap?
Oh, I love scrap.
Can you explain what it is? It's my favorite recycling place as an artist.
So when we talk about like reuse and repair, that is what scrap is all about. It's a nonprofit that was set up to help connect people to supplies. And so you have leftover materials for sewing or for crafts or other things. You can go to one place. It's in the Bayview. They're actually moving to a new location. But nearby, I don't think they made the announcement yet. So they're moving to a new location, which will be better for them and more stable, which we're really happy with because they were actually like being pushed out of their current site. If you check my social media feeds, I'm all over scrap. Scrap is like, I mean,
Was this set up?
no, I mean, go to this place, like, and they do workshops, classes on like how to sew, how to mend, how to do different crafts to teach people the skills, right, that they need, because that's the repair culture. We tend to, like the disposable culture is, oh, something, my shoe sole goes out. Back in the day, it's going back to old people, you know, you might go to a cobbler or someone to do your shoe repair. You don't do that anymore. What do? You throw it away and you buy a new pair of shoes. And now the reverse has to be true, because that shoe, when people look at that shoe, they're saying, oh, I just bought this shoe, it costs X amount of dollars. When I look at that shoe, I think about, okay, well, where did the materials for that shoe come from? How was it transported there? How was it constructed? What were the labor practices? And then finally, now you get the shoe, and then I have to think afterwards, okay, when you're done with the shoe, then what happens to it after you get it disposed of? And our goal should be just to keep everything in circulation as long as possible, because that's better for the planet, because we're not extracting resources and we're keeping resources in play. Right? That should be like common sense. We reuse things all the time. I mean, hopefully at home you're not using like single-use disposable cups just to drink your water or drink your tea. You probably have a mug. That's something we do in our daily life. But we need to do that kind of in our external public life and just normalize that.
Thank you. I have wanted Janet Katari to tell her faith journey, to offer her faith journey for months, and then we have this wonderful program today where we're talking about the environment and life. And several months ago, got a call from the Friends of the Urban Forest. The one thing about this organization is we're very good at cross-sector partnerships. And they said, you're not going to believe this, but in the Biden infrastructure bill, there was a line item for interfaith tree planting. And they said, and it hasn't been axed yet. You want to partner. And so we did, and we committed to 12 plantings in different congregations in vulnerable neighborhoods where we'd plant 40 to 60 trees a pop. And I had the occasion to go to Christchurch Lutheran. They were the epicenter, but they also engaged the neighbors, and we were out there planting trees in the neighborhood. And the community building and the enthusiasm and the spirit there and just doing good was so good. And so it made perfect sense to invite Janet, the pastor of Christchurch Lutheran, to come and offer her faith journey. And so I invite her up to tell her story and to continue to inspire us. You have options.
I'm gonna stand here.
Okay.
Have my notes.
There you go.
Wow, shorter. There we go. All right, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, let me get my iPad set up here. I have paper notes because I've never made it through an iPad presentation that hasn't failed sometime. So just in case. Well, as I'm getting in here, thank you, Michael, for that introduction and for the tree planting and for all the work you do here. And for inviting me. And it's great to see you all, and a special shout out to my 3 people from Christ Church who came to support me today, so I appreciate that. I want to start just by saying that I was baptized when I was 3 weeks old at a Lutheran church in the presence of my Lutheran pastor grandfather, and I now work as a Lutheran pastor. So you might say that my faith journey has been pretty unremarkable, right? Not a lot of change from beginning to now. But I think all of you can probably attest to the fact that a lot can happen on a journey where you're heading back home. So I thought I'd share a few stories from my life to talk about how my faith and life have intersected. I hope it'll illustrate something about me and maybe inspire in you some thoughts about how things are connected for you. I'll start early, not quite baptism, but a little later. When I was 2 years old, my parents got divorced, and my mom started raising me on her own. And I think, any mom in that situation has to really make a decision about what they're going to focus on, where they're going to put their energy. My mom made the choice to invest in faith and community. So for me, that investment in faith meant that we talked about faith every night at dinner. It's hard for me to believe it now. Each day we read a Bible verse and a few paragraphs of a devotional. We answered questions. What does this mean for us now? How does it apply? And every Sunday we went to church, and we stopped at Winchell's Donuts after service. And I was always happy to go to church, not exclusively for the donuts. And the investment in community meant that my mom and I gathered with her group of friends every few weeks for a shared meal, conversation. These women asked me questions about all kinds of things, and I answered, and we sang together. We had a sung grace before our meals and sang hymns and some other songs around the piano when we gathered. And I remember the day that all of this started to come together for me. I was just old enough to join the children's choir at my church, and I was really excited. The day that I became eligible, the choir director called the choir forward to sing. I know now that he wasn't calling up the people who had never been in it before that day, but the kids who'd been practicing for a while. Still, I ran forward. I was filled with excitement, a huge smile on my face. I'd never even sung with them, but I wanted to be a part of that, of this group of people singing together, my faith community. And they welcomed me, even though I didn't know any of the songs. I held on to that feeling of community even as the details of faith became a little more complicated for me as I was growing up. It seemed like what some pastors had taught me was kind of mean and unforgiving and exclusionary, very black and white. And even when a new pastor in my church showered me with the love of God, which was very transformative, it still seemed that my faith needed to be more than just community. You know, we would sing about justice in choir and in our hymns, but there wasn't much seeking justice for what was happening in the world. And that was amplified when I saw what was happening at my high school, and actually all the schools in my district. I went to school in Pasadena, and I don't know, maybe some of you know this, but it was the first district with forced desegregation outside of the South. And that happened in 1970. So when I was growing up, I entered the school system about 1975, 76. They'd lost a lot of white students to private and parochial schools. The schools that I attended were well integrated. White, Black, Asian, Latino students. But white students were very visibly getting preferential treatment. For example, Black kindergartners had to take a long bus ride to school, sometimes 40 minutes to an hour to get to school. And the white kids got to delay that bus ride until they were in 5th grade. Most of the special gifted classes were more segregated than the schools, for sure. But there was one area that lived up to the dream of diversity that I think was intended by that forced desegregation. And that was marching band. Are there any other marching band people here? A couple more. This was a true multicultural community within the school. It was amazing. I only marched for 2 of my 4 high school years. I played the trombone. But there was something really special about that community. In the band community, everyone was welcome. Everyone got a chance to learn and excel and lead. There was a very diverse community, and everyone had to be on time. The rules applied to everyone. So as I was considering my faith and where I saw community and how those seemed a little separated, I started putting my energy into other things. I was still tied to the church, but I had a lot of talent and interest in math and science, and I started shifting in that direction. And certainly most of my college classmates in math and physics were not that engaged in faith. Still, I was really remembering those childhood communities. Now I'm going to jump ahead about 10 years now. I'm going to skip over some things that were actually pretty significant. I got a PhD in chemistry, made a jump from science to business, and I think all of that work was related to that part of faith that seemed missing for me, trying to act in the world to do something. But neither of those pursuits really provided opportunity for acting consistently with my faith, for me. There were big moments, but I would say during that time my faith was pretty stable, or we might say stagnant. And I surprised myself by shifting from working outside of the home to being a stay-at-home mom. And I think what matters about that time that came next is this. I was really struggling with being a mom who wasn't working outside the home, and with understanding who I was meant to be if I wasn't working. And I started thinking a little more about what was most important in life. And that reflection started with my faith. I knew that community was important. These deep, engaging relationships based on deep listening, on love, and on compassion. And I knew that engaging in the world was important to me, all those I'd seen. And I knew that all of that had to be connected. And for me, those things slowly started to come together. Just a little story. When my first child was born, my mother-in-law, who was Hindu, told me about a tradition in her faith. She said that when you first take your child out of the house, the first visit should be to a house of faith, to visit God. And so she encouraged me to take my daughter to our church sanctuary before her first doctor's appointment. Now, I knew that we didn't have to visit church to visit God, and so did my mother-in-law. But that feeling of carrying my week-old daughter into the sanctuary and sitting in quiet prayer next to my mother-in-law was a ritual that was really saturated with meaning. And it was a big step for me in a couple of ways. One, bringing together this idea of faith and intentional action, but also realizing that the connection doesn't need to be this huge swing, right? These small movements can be extremely meaningful. Over the next few years, in addition to trying to raise my kids as I could, I started volunteering at church. I visited, well, we called them shut-ins, right? I would visit people, and I visited people with my infant son, and I can't say it any differently than to say that I felt God's presence in those connections. I did that for some time, and then I started working in youth and family ministries, which was wonderful. I had the opportunity to really think deeply, which I loved, right? That kind of math and physics thing, and experiment in developing and using faith formation tools that brought together all those things I wanted to bring together. The stories of faith, community building, faith in action for the kids, opportunities for them to do that kind of work, and it was really great. I might have done that forever, and that could have been kind of the culmination of my faith journey. But then a whole lot of things happened at the same time. Several family members across all ages, some of whom had been experiencing some mild illnesses previously, became very ill very quickly. all at the same time, including myself. This was a mix of severe physical ailments and severe mental illness. And the combination of being severely ill for me and also needing to be a caregiver for others was daunting and overwhelming. It was the kind of thing that can tear families apart, and it did in my case. And it was extremely painful. But it's also the kind of thing that can tear at faith. And for me, something curious happened. Even at my lowest points, I had this deep and overwhelming sense of God's love. Where did that come from? I kept asking myself, and I could only know, the only way I could answer that was to say it came from God and from all of those early experiences throughout my life. And during that time, I had the chance to gather with many people with severe illnesses and to hear their story. And what a gift that was for people to be willing to share who they were, where they'd come from, what their dreams were. And as all of us started to heal, it became clear that we were all going to come out of it, right? I entered a time of figuring out what's next. And I figured out that the elements of what's next needed to include those things. Meaningful rituals of faith, community building grounded in radical welcome, and action in the community toward justice. I tried on a lot of things, too many to describe, and so disparate as to be even, I don't even want to describe what they were. But after about 5 years of doing this and that, the idea of becoming a pastor was thrust upon me. I had most recently been building a nonprofit centered on spirituality for those not interested in traditional Christian rituals, kind of for the spiritual but not religious types. And a couple of things together. I went to this seminary to ask about having an intern work with me. Sometimes these things turn on you. I ended up, in that case, talking with several of the leaders there about the process, learning about interns, right? Learning about interns, the process of becoming a pastor, and about the types of things those pastors were interested in. And it turns out they were interested in a lot of the same things that I was interested in. And then I went to a larger gathering of the church. It was held in Reno. This was in 2016. And I had a booth with my little nonprofit. And I talked to a lot of interesting people. The first night, I went to the group dinner and sat with the people from my church. But the second night, I decided to sit down at a random table. And I ended up at a table with a very socially active San Francisco pastor and members of their congregation. And they talked about community, about justice, about the rituals of their community. And I was enchanted. And then the presentation started. At this event, pastors were honored on the anniversary of their ordination. They started with the longest serving. I believe that year there was a 70th anniversary pastor. He didn't talk very much. But as they got younger, the pastors were given the opportunity to speak. And they took it, as pastors would do. So one 50th anniversary pastor came up. I don't know how he started his comments, but when I started paying attention, he was saying this. I know there are people here in this crowd, there's maybe 300 people there. I know there are people here in this crowd who have thought about being a pastor. And it really looked like he was staring right at me. And he said, maybe you think you're too old, or you're set in what you're doing, or there's some other obstacle, but I'm here to tell you that you should do it. Well, that really sealed the deal for me. I applied to seminary right after that, and by the fall I was there. And my faith journey has definitely continued since then. Those high school revelations have been deepened and educated through work I did myself as an intern with the Interfaith movement for human integrity and immigration work there, through participating in and leading groups on anti-racism, through a brief about 1 year stint as a night minister, and through talking with and especially listening to hundreds of people in San Francisco, including folks in my new congregation where I've been for almost 4 years now. And I feel so blessed to be able to struggle and experience joy while continuing toward these dreams that I've had of faith and authentic multicultural community and action. And I've also come to realize and experience after a long time that everything is faith, especially through that darkest time. I came to know that faith is embedded in everything, even when I don't realize it. And so I end as I began, right? The grandchild of a Lutheran pastor who became a pastor, and now with this realization that faith really is everything. So I thank you for your time, and thank you, Michael.